In 1953, a surgeon suctioned a thumb-sized piece of tissue from each side of Henry Molaison's brain. The seizures stopped. So did his ability to form a single new memory. For the next 55 years, the structure he lost was called the hippocampus, and its destruction revealed something no one expected. Henry Molaison had suffered severe epileptic seizures since childhood, dozens per day by his late 20s. In desperation, neurosurgeon William Beecher Scoville proposed a radical procedure: remove the medial temporal lobes from both sides of Henry's brain. The surgery worked. The seizures dropped dramatically. But when Henry woke up, something was wrong. He could talk. He could recall his childhood. He remembered the name of the president, but not that he'd just had surgery, not that a nurse had introduced herself 5 minutes ago, not that he'd eaten breakfast that morning. Henry Molaison could hold roughly 30 seconds of experience before it vanished, like writing on water. The clinical term was anterograde amnesia, the total inability to form new long-term memories. Scoville had estimated he'd removed about 8 centimeters of tissue from each temporal lobe, including a structure called the hippocampus. What no one understood yet was that this structure wasn't just involved in memory, it was the gate. Nothing got through to long-term storage without it, and they had removed it from both sides. Neuropsychologist Brenda Milner began testing Henry almost immediately, and the results were strange. She gave him a mirror tracing task: draw a star while only seeing your hand's reflection. Most people make about 30 errors on the first attempt. Henry was no different. But here's what the researchers didn't expect. Each day, he came back with no memory of ever seeing the task, and each day, his performance improved. By the 10th trial, his errors had dropped to just 5 or 6. His hands remembered what his mind could not. This was the first hard evidence that memory isn't a single filing cabinet. There are at least 2 systems: declarative memory, facts, events, the name of someone you just met, runs through the hippocampus. Procedural memory, skills, habits, how your fingers find piano keys, takes a completely different route through the neostriatum and cerebellum. Henry had lost one system entirely. The other was untouched. The brain wasn't supposed to be able to do this. It does it anyway. But his case might have been an anomaly. One surgery, one patient, one damaged brain. Then, in 1985, a virus did almost the same thing to a musician in London. Clive Wearing was one of Britain's finest musicians, a conductor, a keyboardist, a scholar of early music. Then herpes viral encephalitis attacked his brain, destroying much of his medial temporal lobe. When the infection cleared, Wearing was left with an estimated memory span of 7 to 30 seconds. He kept a diary. Almost every entry said the same thing: crossed out, rewritten, crossed out again, every few minutes, for over 30 years. But sit Clive Wearing at a piano, and something extraordinary happens. His fingers find the keys. He conducts a choir with precision and feeling. Music pours out from a brain that cannot remember learning it. Deborah Wearing, Clive's wife, describes decades of this reality in Forever Today. A husband who greets her with overwhelming joy every time she enters the room, because to him, every arrival is the first in years. The pattern was unmistakable. Wearing's damage confirmed exactly what Henry Molaison's surgery had suggested: destroy the hippocampus and its surrounding relay stations, and declarative memory collapses. But skills encoded elsewhere survive. Henry Molaison died in 2008 at the age of 82. He had been studied for 55 years, the most extensively examined patient in the history of neuroscience, and he never once remembered being studied. After his death, researchers preserved his brain and sliced it into 2,401 paper-thin coronal sections, each one digitized and reconstructed into a 3-dimensional map. And this is where the data gets unusual. For decades, neuroscience assumed Scoville had removed Henry's entire hippocampus. The 3D reconstruction told a different story. About 2 centimeters of posterior hippocampal tissue had survived the surgery. What was almost completely destroyed was something else, the entorhinal cortex, the relay station that feeds information into the hippocampus. Suzanne Corkin, the neuroscientist who worked with Henry for decades, details this entire reconstruction in permanent present tense. The implication was startling. Henry's hippocampus wasn't entirely gone. It was disconnected. Intact tissue with no input, like a locked room with no door. The original story had been incomplete for half a century. So what did two shattered minds actually teach us about how memory is stored? First, anterograde amnesia. The inability to form new long-term memories is different from retrograde amnesia, which erases the past. Henry Molaison lost his future, but kept most of his childhood. The hippocampus isn't where old memories live, it's where new ones are built. Second, the evidence is mixed on how long the hippocampus stays involved. One model says it hands memories off to the cortex over time, a temporary scaffold. Another argues it remains essential for vivid episodic details permanently. The debate isn't settled. But what is settled is this: long-term memory formation is not a single warehouse. It is a network of systems, separated by structures so small that a surgeon's suction tube can destroy one and leave the others untouched. Henry Molaison and Clive Wearing lived inside the gap between them. Two people lived for decades inside a perpetual present, one made by a surgeon's tool, the other by a virus. Between them, they exposed the architecture of something we take for granted every waking second, the ability to carry a moment forward. Anterograde amnesia is a window into what memory actually is, and how little separates having it from losing it. Which of the brain's hidden systems would you want to understand next? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe to The Weird Mind for the next one.